Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk a little bit about spiritual enlightenment, and kind of like what it is and what it's not. I mean, this is something that I think we're all obsessed with, on the path is to try to get some clarity as to what spiritual enlightenment is. And I have some notes here. I have some comments from ChatGPT that I'm not going to take literally, but I'm just going to riff off. I just want this video to be like a complete conscious creation. I would say, in the first instance, whatever spiritual enlightenment is, it has to apply all the time. Like, if it doesn't apply all the time, it's not spiritual enlightenment. So you had some state, some trip, or, some whatever, you had some kind of psychedelic experience on 5-MeO DMT. That's not spiritual enlightenment, because spiritual enlightenment is not time bound. It applies across the board. And so this is basically the foundation for truth with a capital T. And it plays out in different stages on the path. I have my own ideas about how it plays out, my own models. But ultimately, whatever spiritual enlightenment is, it has to apply all the time, or else it's not spiritual enlightenment. It's just a state or a stage. So keep that in mind. And also, a mistake a lot of people make is they try to force this with a philosophy. So they come up with some kind of a philosophy and then adhere to this concept of truth to try to almost like arm wrestle themselves into spiritual enlightenment, right? Instead of realizing, no, you could be eating a salad and be spiritually enlightened. You don't need to sit and drill these ideas into your mind to be spiritually enlightened. Spiritual enlightenment, if it is whatever it is, it has to exist all the time. So that's something that really I want you guys to consider. Because there's this constant neuroticism I see being promulgated, you can only be spiritually enlightened. You can only be spiritually enlightened if you do this or do that, or No, I mean the whole concept, the whole teaching or pointer of truth with a capital T is that whatever spiritual enlightenment is, it has to always apply. Right? So that just try to grok that. Right? That's the first thing. That's truth with a capital T. And some people take a more intellectual approach to this. Some people take a more relational approach to this. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, nothing changes with spiritual enlightenment, right? This idea that something is going to dramatically change when you become spiritually enlightened is the biggest hoax. It's just like the hoax of self-help books, right? There's all these self-help books. I can boil self-help down to two principles. One, make a goal. Two, do it. That's it. Right? You don't need any books. What you need the books for is motivation and energy and inspiration. But they often don't serve that purpose. What they do is they fill your mind with all these ideas, and then you never take the action, right? So it's the same thing with spiritual enlightenment. So now let's get into these in a little bit more detail. So there are those who are stuck in the truth phases of spiritual enlightenment, and they're concerned about being right. They need to be right to be spiritually enlightened. And they want everybody else to be right. So you have these kinds of people. Then you have people that have graduated from that, who have moved into love. Right? So we go from the truth to love to beauty. So the people in love, they're tolerant of basically people who have differing versions of truth. They see they see that relation is more important than agreement or control. The control is relational. It's not ideological. So the masculine is about ideological control, truth. The feminine is about relational control or community. And so what love is about is getting beyond truth, but also not losing your truth. Not letting somebody else gaslight you as to what truth is either. And, you know, I mean, it's... I really try to get along with, you know, with even people who disagree with me, you know? And the way you do that is through humor. So, this is why humor is so important in relationships and in beauty, because humor, we're all different. We're all like very different personalities, but what humor does is it brings people together because we can all laugh, or we can all appreciate art. We can all watch a movie together. You know, we can go to a jazz performance together, listen to an album together. You know, in that sense, art is higher than love. It actually bridges beyond the kind of ego, the egoic aspects of love, because you don't love everything, right? So there's still a lot of ego that's wrapped up in love. But beauty is we can all go to a performance together and appreciate that performance, right? So art, in a way, is, or beauty is higher than love, but it integrates love and it integrates truth. Love is higher than truth because people that are hung up on truth are exclusive, right? They're dismissive. And being dismissive is the inverse of love. This is the problem with truth, is that you become dismissive. So you don't realize this. When you need something to be true, something else has to be false. Now, there's all kinds of like sneaky ways where you can try to say, well, you can try to redefine truth so it doesn't seem like it does this. It does this, right? And when you can see this when you interface with people who are really bought into truth. They have to be agreed with, and they have to be right. Now, that's a huge barrier to love, though. See, people who have love integration, they realize I don't need the people around me to agree with me or my truth or my God or my philosophy. We can laugh together. You know, we can go to the park and let our dogs play together. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be like you have to agree with me to be in my family or in my tribe or in my community. See, that's the problem with truth, is you have a barrier to love, basically, to higher love. And actually, this might sound, if you guys think about this, it might sound very superficial to you right now. But I've seen this play itself out with people who can't get out of this for some reason. And even to this day, they're still stuck in this. And actually what they do is they try to define love in terms of truth. to make it seem like love and truth are the same or something like that, right? So that they don't have to face this issue. Like love has to be like truth for them, because obviously they're beholden to truth. But these people just don't get it, right? They're like relationally still kind of children, you know. The essence of love is acceptance of difference. I mean, you can see this with Stage Green, although Stage Green doesn't do a very good job of this. Like, this is a really hard thing, actually, to pigeonhole on the spiral, because ego is always involved, right, in how we decide to label things and the lines that we decide to draw. But make no mistake about it, right? I mean, love is very different. Like, higher love is very different than higher truth. And humor is very important to higher love and higher beauty. But I think, we can just focus on higher love right now. Humor is very important to relationship in general, because everybody, when people laugh, it brings people together. Or when people witness a common spectacle, it brings people together. But humor is actually one of the best kind of art forms that brings people together, because everybody likes to laugh. So comedy, right? Comedy becomes essential when you're focused on love, even like human love. You got to have some sense of humor, some sense of comedic timing, and not doing it like an asshole, but doing it more like an artist. Like you just realize, like, you allow your natural humor to emerge, and you work on it, just like you would work on your music or your writing or your YouTube videos or whatever it is, your cooking, your job, right? But to not value humor, it puts you squarely in truth usually. And the problem with truth is that your relationships are going to be bad, because you're going to double down on your truth and you're going to exclude, right? Which is the inverse of love. So love requires truth, but it goes beyond truth, and it's different than truth. This is probably what this video is going to be. The topic of this video. This idea that love is truth, I think, is just a thought. It's a theory. But if you look at direct experience, you'll realize that's not the case. Love is about acceptance of difference, trying to find common ground with accepting people for who they are too. And as long as they're coming at you in good faith, you can have a relationship. If they're not coming at you in good faith, you can still have a relationship, but it's going to be more like a comedy, kind of situation where you're kind of teasing each other or something like that. You can do that. The bottom line is, you can find a way to relate with everybody. And humor is actually, very nuanced forms of humor are the best ways to interface with people that are hostile to you. So you can even have a relationship. When you talk about love, you can even have a relationship with people who are hostile toward you by joking around with them. Like maybe they're attacking you, you're attacking them, but you make it funny, right? So this is why aesthetics actually goes beyond love, because ultimately it's all creation. Even truth is creation. This is going to scare you, but your truth is just really just a creation. And love is a creation too. So ultimately, beauty is the highest pointer. And then you can even say not even too. You can go beyond beauty. You can go beyond any kind of model too. But what bugs me is this thesis that truth, love, and beauty are like merged into one. No, right? Not at all. Not at all. Like, love is very different than truth, and beauty is very different than love and truth. Love needs truth, but it goes beyond it. Like, you do have to have some kind of level of ego transcendence or self realization to get to love. Nobody's going to disagree with that. But love requires acceptance of difference too. Acceptance of people who even have nothing, are nothing like you. Or it's like trying to find a way to relate with everything and everybody. I mean, that would be like the most expansive kind of concept of love, really. Nobody's going to do that, right? Everybody's going to have a limited window of love. But definitely to detach love from truth, I think, is step one. That has to be done. See, if you're still attaching love to truth, you're not going to get it. So you have to detach love from truth. Love has to become its own thing. And the thing is, you can interface with more things so that everybody is involved, so that you can expand your link to more and more things. But it's not limited to just like people who agree with you, right? It could be people who are hostile to you too. It could be people you have nothing in common with. It could be, it's like a musician. Like Metallica doesn't really say like you have to think this way to come to our concert. No, like if you like our music, you can come to our concert, right? See, this is why aesthetics is actually higher than love, right? Because we all have one thing in common. We have art that we like, and that brings us together. You can have all kinds of different people that are at that Metallica concert. But Metallica is definitely not saying you have to adhere to this rigid philosophy that we have, to come to one of our concerts. Not at all, right? That's definitely not what they want to do. So, but this just goes to show that the way to build links is even to get beyond love, right? This is the beauty of art, performance art, is, for example, let's say you make a movie. You don't care who comes to the theater and watches your movie. So it even goes beyond love. Like aesthetics goes beyond love, but it includes love and it includes truth. Like it definitely brings people together, which is an aspect of love. So, so let's talk a little bit about spiritual enlightenment. Yeah, if anybody tries to read something to you when they're talking about spiritual enlightenment, that's probably the biggest red flag right there. And the reason why is because if you don't know what spiritual enlightenment is, don't talk about it. Seriously. Because you're not ripe yet, right? This is kind of funny, but it's kind of true. You're not ripe yet. It's all concepts in your mind still. So what you're doing ultimately is you're sharing philosophy when you're talking about spiritual enlightenment. What you really want is a pointer from somebody who's talking about spiritual enlightenment is that person has it and they're taking great pains to try to, describe what it is in a variety of different ways. Because it is true that it's really hard to describe in language. So what I'm going to do, friends, I'm going to take a break. I'll come back. We'll do the last 10 minutes of this video. I'm going to take a stab at trying to describe what spiritual enlightenment is. So just give me 1 second. Okay, friends, welcome back. So I'm always fascinated by this question, what is spiritual enlightenment? And I like to answer it. I've done videos on it too, just different times I've said different things about it. One of the pointers that I'm going to give you is that spiritual enlightenment is not something that changes. It's stuck there. It's stuck there. Like it wouldn't matter what you did, it would still be there. It doesn't require any thought. It doesn't require any feeling. It's always there. Like it became there somehow. All right. So, this seeking mentality or this looping mentality, right? Like, I got to keep looping on this theory about spiritual enlightenment, or I got to read these books or whatever. Like that's not spiritual enlightenment. That's teaching spiritual enlightenment to people who don't have it yet, or if you want to become a teacher, but don't confuse that with spiritual enlightenment. Spiritual enlightenment is always there. You just have to recognize it. It has to become part of you. It has to become part of you. We can call this self-realization. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to study to be spiritually enlightened. Not at all. The ego is going to do exactly what it's always done. Except now you might have a spiritual ego, right? A new spiritual ego that manifests, and then you see that play itself out. But the ego is going to continue. Maya is going to continue to do what it's always done. The difference is that you realize when you become spiritually enlightened that ego is not in your control entirely, if at all. And it doesn't need to be. So this is where you get, the witness concept, the witness watching the changing world. But that's a thought. This is what a lot of people don't realize. That is a thought too. That can be, you don't need that thought. I mean, when you're meditating, you don't have that thought, right? And you're still spiritually enlightened. So people tend to think that they have to have a certain kind of philosophy or spirituality to be spiritually enlightened. Instead of realizing, no, that's just what the ego is doing. The ego is doing the spirituality. Now, here's the thing. That's a thought story. So what you need to do is to be able to put that down too. See, freedom is about allowing freedom isn't like reading something. Freedom is I'm okay with whatever is happening. No, I'm not saying from a moral standpoint. I'm just saying like you're not against your ego when you're spiritually enlightened. You're not against the I thought when you're spiritually enlightened. You're not against the finite perspective when you're spiritually enlightened. You're not against anything. You're free. See, it's unfree people who are against something and they think that has to do with spiritual enlightenment. And that's where they're, kind of attached to truth. They need truth for some reason, which what they don't realize is that that's their ego. Their ego needs the truth. But they don't think they have an ego. So it's really hard to get through to these people. They don't even think that they have an ego, right? It's really scary for them to consider the fact that you can be spiritually enlightened and also say like, I prefer this or I don't prefer that. Like there's no duality between the human and the mystical or the divine. And so the thing about spiritual enlightenment that's actually interesting is that nothing has in fact changed. And everything has changed. Like nothing has in fact changed. Like you're still the same person that you've always been, right? Same personality, same finite perspective. Don't expect to transform into some kind of a alien or Muji or some kind of, that's all persona. You wouldn't do that. You may not even have a choice what kind of persona that you present. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter. Whatever the ego wants to do, it's going to happen. And also, attachment to the ego doesn't mean that you're not spiritually enlightened. See, this is another problem. It's like reducing the relative to the absolute. Well, that's a duality. See, no, this is where I like Neo-Advaita. I like Neo-Advaita in the sense that like this is all there is, which is also a thought. It's a pointer, but this doesn't make a distinction between the absolute and the relative. This experience doesn't make a distinction between the absolute and the relative. That's a thought. So, but then even this is a kind of a thought, because if you're constantly focused on this, right, that's not spiritual enlightenment either. That's a state. Spiritual enlightenment is not about state. But you have to come to recognize it. See, that's awakening. But then there's degrees of awakening too, because not everybody who has had some awakenings are entirely liberated. Like liberation is a totally different thing than, just Advaita Vedanta or Neo-Advaita or Carl Jung or, liberation with the capital L is nothing needs to change. Right. Okay, friends. Hopefully this was a good video. I'll talk to you next week. Take care.